The victory banquet was in full swing when I lifted the tent flap and discovered my betrothed, General Harrison, engaged in a most peculiar game with his female strategist. She stood there, her robes partially undone, guiding his hand as he aimed an arrow directly at her heart, a twisted display of what they called a trust exercise. "What is the meaning of this?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the revelry. Harrison barely glanced my way, his tone dismissive. "Merely a game between comrades who've shared life and death on the battlefield. Nothing more than testing trust between warriors." The strategist, Vivian, arched an eyebrow with a coquettish smile. "Sister-in-law, please don't misunderstand. Our general simply wishes to see if, should he lose, he could truly offer his heart to me. These are military customs. I fear a sheltered lady like yourself wouldn't comprehend such things." My hand moved instinctively toward my sword, but Harrison's expression darkened. "Don't bring your petty jealousies from the capital into my military camp." I nodded slowly, watching as the gathered officers stared in bewilderment. Then I reached for a heavy warbow and seated myself in the place of honor. "Ah, so we're playing with lives. How fortuitous! My hands have been itching for some sport." Harrison frowned as I drew the bowstring taut, the arrow aimed squarely between his eyes. "Since we're all here, perhaps I'll join this little game. The loser keeps their head." The command tent fell into absolute silence. The boisterous cheering, the crude jokes, the raucous laughter, all vanished in an instant. Only the sound of heavy breathing remained, thick with tension. Harrison's face turned ashen, his eyes fixed on me as though seeing a stranger. "Charlotte, have you taken leave of your senses?" His voice was low, trembling with rage. I allowed myself a slight smile, my grip unwavering. "General, didn't you just say this was a trust exercise? What's the matter? Don't you trust me with your life?" I threw his own words back at him, each syllable precise and cutting. Harrison's complexion grew even more pallid. Beside him, Vivian, her robes still disheveled, stepped forward with that same saccharine smile. "Sister-in-law, please stop this nonsense," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "That's a 100-pound warbow. You'll injure your delicate wrists. The general was merely jesting with us. Surely you're not taking it seriously." Her words, while ostensibly conciliatory, carried clear undertones of mockery, painting me as a jealous wife who couldn't appreciate their sophisticated military humor. The officers began to murmur among themselves. "This Miss Blackwood truly doesn't know her place. Indeed, what status does our general hold? For a mere lady of leisure to point a weapon at him, it's preposterous. She's insulting the general's dignity. Absolutely unreasonable. These capital-bred women are always so dramatic. Our military has no patience for such theatrics." Every whispered word reached my ears with crystal clarity. I inwardly sneered. Dramatic? Presumptuous? They would soon learn the true meaning of presumption. Harrison, bolstered by his men's support, yet trapped by his own pride, found himself in an impossible position. As supreme commander, showing fear now would destroy his authority forever. He drew a deep breath, forcing his rage down, and managed a sardonic smile. "Very well, Charlotte. If you're so eager to play, I'll indulge you." But then his expression grew calculating as he added conditions to our wager. However, military affairs brook no jest. If this is to be a wager, there must be stakes. When you lose, and you will, you'll not only kowtow before me in front of everyone, but you'll also surrender your mother's dowry and the Blackwood military treatises to Vivian as compensation. Vivian's eyes gleamed with avarice, though she made a show of protest. "General, how could I accept such precious things? Those are sister-in-law's wedding gifts." Her words said one thing, but her gaze remained fixed on me with naked greed and challenge. Fury blazed in my chest. The Blackwood military treatises were my mother's legacy, generations of accumulated knowledge and strategy. Harrison actually intended to gift them to this woman. Agreed, I said calmly, but I'm raising the stakes. I locked eyes with Harrison, each word deliberate and clear. When I win, I want your commander's seal and your head, though I'll allow you to keep it attached to your shoulders for now. Harrison burst into derisive laughter. Charlotte, do you actually believe that little display of yours constituted drawing the bow? You barely managed to pull the string back an inch. He was convinced I'd been bluffing, that my earlier show had exhausted all my strength. In his mind, a sheltered young lady could never truly draw a 100-pound warbow. Excellent! I accept your terms, he declared, his eyes filled with contemptuous amusement. To him, this wager was already won. Seeing the bet sealed, Vivian's smile turned positively venomous. She clapped her hands together with theatrical delight. Since we're playing with lives, perhaps we should change the target. Her gaze turned predatory as she looked toward the tent entrance. My heart sank with dread. At another clap from Vivian, 2 soldiers dragged in a battered old man, his body covered in wounds and one leg twisted unnaturally. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Sister-in-law, since we're having such fun, let's use this old servant of yours as our target, Vivian announced with malicious glee. It was Benedict, my faithful retainer who had watched over me since childhood. Seeing Benedict bloodied and barely conscious, my vision turned red with rage. Benedict! I started forward, but 2 soldiers blocked my path. Vivian covered her mouth, laughing like tinkling bells. Don't be hasty, sister-in-law. Military camps don't house useless mouths. Your old servant was caught lurking about, attempting to spy on military secrets by our patrol. Quite convenient, really. We can put him to good use. The accusation was absurd. Benedict had served me faithfully for over a decade. He would never commit such treachery. I whirled toward Harrison, hoping for even a shred of decency, some sense of justice. Instead, he glanced at Benedict with the same interest one might show a crushed insect. He's merely a servant, Harrison said with casual indifference. If he dies, he dies. Don't let it spoil our entertainment. Those words struck like a blade to my heart, severing the last thread of feeling I held for him. I had once believed his callousness was simply youthful arrogance, masculine pride. I had thought that with enough devotion and patience, he might eventually appreciate my worth. Now I saw the truth. It had all been wishful thinking. He possessed no heart at all. Benedict struggled weakly on the ground, his voice barely a whisper as he called out, "Young miss, don't mind me. Please, just run." His words, thick with tears and desperation, pierced me to the core. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. When I opened them again, all emotion had drained away, leaving only bone-deep coldness. I looked at this pair of despicable lovers as though they were already corpses. "Very well," I said, the word emerging from between clenched teeth. "I accept." Vivian's triumph was evident as she gestured for soldiers to drag Benedict 100 paces away and bind him to a wooden post. "General, please proceed," she said with a graceful bow. Harrison, eager to demonstrate his prowess and intimidate me, selected a lighter bow. He knocked an arrow with fluid precision, his movements smooth as flowing water. The arrow sang through the air with a sharp whistle. My heart clenched in terror. The shaft didn't strike Benedict's vital points. Instead, it precisely severed the wooden pin holding his hair in place. His gray locks tumbled free as the arrowhead grazed his scalp, drawing thin lines of blood. Benedict trembled violently, nearly fainting from shock, while the tent erupted in thunderous applause. The general's archery is divine. Magnificent marksmanship, absolutely precise. Truly our god of war. They praised Harrison's supernatural skill, his ability to control both force and accuracy with such precision. Harrison basked in their adulation, then tossed his bow onto the table before me with a loud thump. "Your turn, Charlotte." He looked down at me with theatrical contempt. "Do try not to let your hands shake. If you miss your mark, your old servant won't survive it." I ignored his taunts, reaching for the bow. Just as my fingers were about to touch it, Vivian suddenly pressed her hand over mine. "Wait," she said with that same sickeningly sweet smile. "For fairness, since our general shot blindfolded, sister-in-law must do the same." Her voice was honey-sweet, but her words dripped with malice. "Moreover," she continued, drawing out the suspense, "you must spin around 10 times before shooting." Blindfolded, spinning, shooting at a human target. This wasn't a trust exercise. It was premeditated murder. Some of the officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing Vivian had gone too far, but none dared speak up. After all, one was the supreme commander, the other his favored strategist. No one wanted to risk their ire for the sake of an irrelevant servant and a soon-to-be disgraced lady. Most simply watched with morbid curiosity, eager to see how this presumptuous capital-bred woman would humiliate herself. I fixed Vivian with a stare cold enough to freeze blood. "Are you certain you want to play for such high stakes?" My gaze unnerved her momentarily, but she quickly straightened, emboldened by Harrison's protection. "What's wrong? Having second thoughts, sister-in-law?" She raised her chin defiantly. "If you're too frightened, simply kneel and beg the general's forgiveness now. Hand over the Blackwood treatises, and we'll call it settled." She was certain I wouldn't risk Benedict's life on such a gamble. Harrison stood with arms crossed, observing coldly. He clearly approved of Vivian's methods. To utterly crush my dignity while demonstrating his absolute authority, he decided to provide a personal demonstration. "Bring the blindfold," he commanded sharply. Vivian eagerly presented a length of black cloth. Harrison took it and bound his eyes. Vivian herself picked up the drum mallets and positioned herself beside a war drum. "General, whenever you're ready." She began striking a rhythmic pattern. Boom, 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 boom. The drum beats echoed through the tent. Harrison, blindfolded, tilted his head to listen, apparently using the sound to determine direction. Suddenly he moved. He drew his bow and loosed 3 arrows in rapid succession, his movements lightning fast. Swish, swish, swish. 3 shafts flew in a triangular formation, whistling toward the target 100 paces distant. Everyone leaned forward and gasped in amazement. All 3 arrows had passed precisely through the square holes of 3 copper coins hanging from the target. The shafts penetrated cleanly and embedded themselves deep in the wooden board behind. The tent exploded with excitement. Supernatural skill, absolutely supernatural. General is mighty. General is mighty. Harrison slowly removed his blindfold, his face bearing the arrogant pride of one who commands heaven and earth. He savored their worship before turning his contemptuous gaze upon me. "Did you see that clearly?" he said with supreme arrogance. "That's genuine skill forged through real combat, not something your feminine needlework could ever match." Vivian immediately nestled against Harrison's chest, her voice full of mockery. "Sister-in-law, did you witness that? This is what a real man looks like. You should surrender now before you embarrass yourself by wetting your trousers from fright." I remained silent, simply taking the black cloth from Vivian's hands. Then, before everyone's eyes, I wound it carefully around my own head, layer by layer. The world plunged into absolute darkness. The surrounding clamor seemed to fade away. muffled and distant. Yet my hearing became extraordinarily acute in that moment. I could hear the wind, the crackling of torches, and the malicious breathing of every person harboring ill intent. Seeing me actually blindfold myself, Vivian's eyes flashed with vicious satisfaction. She signaled to several of her loyal followers. They immediately understood her meaning. The men quietly approached Benedict and began beating gongs and drums with tremendous force. Clang, 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 crash, crash, crash. The piercing cacophony drowned out everything else. They sought to destroy my hearing, to disorient me completely. But that wasn't all. Someone began pushing me from behind, trying to make me lose balance and stumble. I staggered forward several steps, the tent immediately filled with malicious laughter. Ha! She can't even stand properly and thinks she can shoot arrows? Just surrender already. Stop making a fool of yourself. Exactly! What's a woman trying to prove? Through this chaos and confusion, Harrison's cold voice rang out clearly. Charlotte, surrender now. You cannot win. His tone held no mercy, only the condescending charity of absolute superiority. I stood motionless in place. To them, I appeared paralyzed by fear, frozen in terror. Only I knew what I was truly doing, regulating my breathing, channeling all my rage, all my killing intent into each measured breath. Seeing my prolonged silence, Vivian grew bolder, her voice becoming even more arrogant. Oh my, what's wrong with sister-in-law? Are you crying from fright? Perhaps I should be merciful and shoot this arrow for you. Though I warn you, my hand isn't very steady. If I accidentally hit his heart, don't blame me for it. The tent erupted in cruel laughter, their gazes like needles piercing my flesh with unconcealed malice and mockery. Harrison seemed to lose patience entirely. He waved dismissively, his voice hard as iron. Charlotte, stop wasting time. I'm counting to 3. If you don't shoot, you forfeit. When that happens, even if you bash your head bloody kowtowing, you'll still hand over the Blackwood treatises. Just then, I heard one of Vivian's trusted men quietly approaching Benedict, who was bound to the post. I heard the whisper of steel as he silently drew his blade. I heard his breathing, heavy with murderous intent. In that moment, all my anger, humiliation, and resentment crystallized into ice-cold killing intent. My world became utterly silent. The clanging gongs, the malicious laughter, all of it vanished. I could hear only 3 heartbeats, Vivian's, Harrison's, and that of the assassin preparing to strike. Harrison began his count. 1! Vivian was probably covering her mouth in delighted anticipation, waiting to watch me fail spectacularly before groveling like a whipped dog. All the officers held their breath, eager to witness how this pampered capital lady would be utterly ruined in their military camp. This was a death trap designed specifically for me. 2! Benedict's ragged breathing grew more labored as the assassin's blade drew closer to his throat. I couldn't wait any longer. I drew a deep breath and tightened my grip on the bowstring. 3! Harrison's roar echoed with absolute certainty. Charlotte, you've lost. Keep your head. My lips curved in a bloodthirsty smile. The 100-pound war bow in my hands was drawn to its absolute limit, the frame groaning under the strain as if it might shatter at any moment. Harrison, watch carefully, I said, my voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the tent. This is true divine archery. The moment my words fell, I released the string. Crack! The sound was like thunder splitting the earth. What left the bow wasn't the single arrow everyone expected. It was 3 shafts, all released simultaneously. The trio of arrows transformed into streaks of black lightning, their passage tearing the air with such speed that human eyes couldn't track their flight. The next instant, screams and cries of shock erupted together. The first arrow pierced the wrist of Vivian's assassin just as he prepared to slit Benedict's throat. The tremendous force carried his hand backward, sending his blade clattering to the ground as he howled like a slaughtered pig. The second arrow grazed Vivian's cheek, its razor edge drawing a line of blood before striking and shattering the golden coronet that bound her hair. Her black tresses exploded outward, leaving her wild-haired and ghastly as a vengeful spirit. She stood frozen, her eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. The third arrow flew with the force of divine wrath straight toward Harrison. Harrison's pupils dilated instantly. He tried to dodge but found his body completely immobilized. That shaft, under his horrified gaze, pierced precisely through the crimson plume atop his helmet, then carried it with tremendous momentum to pin the iron warhelm firmly to the back of his commander's chair, the very symbol of his authority. The entire tent fell into deathly silence. Not even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Only Harrison's helmet, pinned to the chair, continued resonating from the tremendous impact. Every officer stood slack-jawed, as though placed under a paralysis spell. Their faces, once filled with mockery and derision, now showed only infinite shock, terror, and disbelief. I tore away the black cloth covering my eyes and tossed it carelessly to the ground. As my vision cleared, my gaze swept across the assembly like an ice-cold blade. No one dared meet my eyes. Finally, my attention settled on Harrison, who had collapsed to the ground, his legs still trembling, a dark stain spreading across his trousers. "Blind shooting?" I asked, my lips curving in a smile of infinite scorn. "Sound-guided archery?" I walked forward slowly, each step seeming to land on their hearts. "Harrison, these are merely games I mastered by age 10. My voice wasn't loud, yet it struck like hammer blows upon every heart present. Your pathetic stolen techniques. You dare call that archery in my presence?" Harrison sat collapsed on the ground, shaking like a leaf in a storm. He pointed at me with a trembling finger, his lips quivering, unable to form a single word. This is Blackwood divine archery?" he whispered in disbelief, staring at me as though I were some otherworldly creature. How can you? This is impossible." I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned and walked step by step toward Vivian, who lay crumpled and trembling on the ground. Blood still flowed down her cheek, mixing with tears and mucus in a revolting display. I looked down at her with not an ounce of mercy in my eyes. "Earlier, you said the loser should offer their heart to you." I slowly crouched to meet her gaze. "I have no use for your filthy heart, but your tongue has been far too noisy." Vivian's eyes widened in terror as she desperately tried to crawl backward. "No, please, sister-in-law, spare me." I drew the slender sword that had been concealed at my waist. The blade was thin as a cicada's wing, gleaming with cold light in the firelight. The blade flashed once. "Since you enjoy spreading lies, you won't be needing that mouth anymore." "Ah!" Vivian clutched her face, releasing an anguished wail. Blood couldn't be stopped from pouring between her fingers, instantly staining her robes crimson. She writhed on the ground in agony, a picture of absolute misery. Harrison finally snapped out of his shocked paralysis. Seeing Vivian's condition, his terror transformed instantly into rage. "Charlotte! You vicious witch! How dare you harm her?" He struggled furiously, trying to charge at me and tear me apart. But with his helmet pinned fast, he could only kick helplessly and rage impotently, a sight both comical and pathetic. I held my bloodied sword and approached him without sparing a glance for Vivian's writhing form. Harrison continued his tirade. "Guards, arrest this madwoman. I'll see her court-martialed for—" Before he could finish, I raised my hand and delivered a resounding slap across his face. Slap! The crisp sound of the blow echoed above even Vivian's wailing. Harrison was stunned, speechless, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth as he stared at me in disbelief. You dare strike me? I am Supreme Commander. Commander? I laughed coldly before delivering another backhand that snapped his head to the side. You dare claim that title? I looked down at him with eyes like winter ice. Harrison, you used my family's military strategies to win your victories, learned archery from my teachings to gain fame and position, and now, for the sake of this fraudulent woman, you dare threaten me with military justice? My words exploded like thunder in the ears of every officer present. The tent erupted in amazed murmurs. Officers exchanged bewildered glances, eyes full of shock and confusion. What does she mean? The general learned archery from Miss Blackwood? And military strategy too? Does this mean our great victory was actually Miss Blackwood's achievement? How is this possible? Harrison's face flushed crimson as he roared defensively. Silence! All of you! Be silent! She's spouting mad nonsense! He glared at me with venomous hatred. Charlotte, do you think anyone will believe your insane ravings? The Blackwood line died out long ago. You're nothing but an unwanted orphan. Is that so? I smiled without anger, pulling a token from my robes and slamming it onto the table. It was a token forged from black iron, inscribed with the character for Blackwood. Open your dog eyes and look closely. Now remember who delivered the crucial stratagem on the eve of that decisive ambush battle. My voice rang throughout the military tent. The deputy general nearest to us picked up the token with trembling hands. He had personally received that battle-turning stratagem, and its seal remained etched in his memory. When he saw the inscription clearly, his face went deathly pale. He dropped to his knees with a loud thump and kowtowed deeply before me. This humble officer was blind. I greet the young marshal. His prostration was absolute submission to Blackwood bloodline. Following his lead, the veteran officers who had once served under my father and brothers reddened their eyes and knelt one by one. The legendary Blackwood family, thought to have perished completely, had not died out after all. This woman they had dismissed as a pampered capital lady was the true Blackwood heir. She had been secretly guiding Harrison all along. Harrison had stolen heaven's merit, claiming all glory for himself. Harrison's face turned ashen. All his pride, all his honor, was being torn to shreds before his very eyes. He made one final desperate attempt. Charlotte, listen to me, please. I do love you. His voice cracked with pleading desperation. I was only temporarily bewitched by her. We still have our betrothal. We can... I laughed coldly and cut him off. From my robes, I produced our betrothal contract, one I had prepared for this moment. Before everyone's eyes, I tore it to shreds with a loud ripping sound. Then I scattered those fragments across his face like confetti. From this day forth, I, Charlotte Blackwood, and you, Harrison Reed, are strangers. We owe each other nothing. But everything that belongs to my family, I will reclaim every single item. My gaze moved slowly to the commander's seal sitting on the table, the symbol of supreme military authority. A wager is a wager, I said, my voice ice cold. General Harrison, I'm allowing your head to remain on your shoulders for now, but this commander's seal, hand it over. Harrison was stripped of his military authority like a mangy dog. Two burly soldiers grabbed him by the arms and unceremoniously dragged him from the commander's chair, tossing him outside the main tent without ceremony. As for Vivian, who had lost both her beauty and her patron, her fate was even more wretched. She pressed her hands to her ruined face while being bound as a spy who had corrupted military discipline and dragged away to the prison camp. The two encountered each other outside the tent, immediately launching into a pathetic display of mutual destruction. Vivian, her mouth still bleeding heavily, cursed incoherently, "Harrison, you useless wretch! Can't even handle one woman! You've ruined my face, you coward! What kind of man are you? You begged me for strategies and counsel, but now that you've lost, you won't take responsibility? You fraud!" Harrison, already burning with rage and needing an outlet, became even more incensed. He charged forward and kicked her viciously in the chest. "Shut your mouth, you vile witch! If you hadn't suggested that cursed life or death wager, would I be in this position? It's all your fault, you harbinger of doom. I should have sent you to serve the common soldiers long ago." The two grappled on the ground, clawing at each other's hair and clothes, completely debasing themselves before the entire army. They had become the camp's greatest laughingstock. I paid no attention to the farce outside, instead taking my rightful place in the commander's seat and assuming control of the entire army. My first act was to swiftly reorganize military discipline. Those who had abused their positions under Harrison, oppressing their fellow soldiers, were rooted out one by one and punished according to military law. Light offenses earned flogging. Serious ones resulted in immediate execution. In short order, the army's atmosphere was completely transformed, and no one dared defy orders again. Harrison naturally refused to accept his total downfall. He wandered throughout the camp, attempting to spread rumors among ignorant new recruits. "Charlotte is a murderous witch who kills her own husband. She wants to rebel. I'm a court-appointed official. She's committing treason. Brothers, don't be fooled by her. She's leading everyone down a path to ruin." He hoped to incite the soldiers to revolt and restore his power. But he hadn't counted on the veteran soldiers who had served under my father, General Blackwood. They forcibly suppressed his rumors before they could spread. These men pinned Harrison to the ground and beat him severely. "You ungrateful dog! Without the Blackwood family, what would you be? If the old general hadn't taken you in, you'd have starved to death in the streets long ago. Now you dare slander our young marshal. We'll beat you to death, you treacherous beast. If we ever hear another word against the young marshal from you, we'll cut out your tongue for wine." Harrison was left battered and broken, tossed aside like a dead dog. He had truly reached the end of his rope. That very night, he knelt outside my command tent. Through tears and mucus, he wailed about the past. "Charlotte, do you remember? When we were children, you loved following behind me, calling me Brother Harrison. I swore then to protect you for life. I know I was wrong, truly wrong. That Vivian bewitched me. She seduced me. Let's start over. I swear I'll devote myself entirely to you alone." Inside my tent, I continued reading military treatises while leisurely sipping tea. Benedict, now dressed in clean clothes with his wounds properly tended, stood beside me in attendance. I listened to the wailing outside without lifting my head. "Benedict," I said casually, "there's a dog barking outside. It's too noisy. Go splash some wash water on it to sober it up." Benedict paused momentarily. Then his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Yes, young miss." He immediately fetched a basin of my just-used washing water, still steaming hot. Lifting the tent flap, he unceremoniously dumped it over the kneeling Harrison. Harrison screamed and rolled on the ground from the scalding water, yet incredibly, he didn't leave. He endured the filth and pain, continuing to kneel there, crying desperately, "Charlotte, as long as you'll forgive me, I'll do anything, even die." I slowly set down my military treatise and lifted the tent flap. I looked at his pitiful, ridiculous appearance, my lips curving in an icy smile. "Oh?" I said softly, "then go ahead and die." Harrison's face instantly turned white as ash. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only managed a few sounds of despair. He finally understood. I felt nothing for him anymore. However, just as the internal turmoil in our camp began to settle, the border grew unstable. Enemy forces, taking advantage of our internal chaos, launched a surprise attack. Signal fires blazed across the entire frontier in a single night. Harrison, desperate and seeing nowhere else to turn, believed this was his opportunity. He gathered the few remaining loyalists who still harbored illusions about him. "Brothers, the time to achieve glory has come." He spoke with passionate conviction. "That Charlotte is just a woman. What does she know of warfare? With the enemy's surprise attack, she's surely panicking. If we launch a night raid on their main camp and take the enemy general's head, I can redeem myself and reclaim the commander's seal." His followers hesitated. "But General, we're just a handful of men, and we have no military authorization." "What need have we for authorization?" Harrison interrupted crudely, spittle flying. "Speed is essential in war. Fortune favors the bold. Once I regain my position, I guarantee you'll all receive promotions and enjoy wealth beyond measure." Swayed by his promises, they wavered. Harrison led them out under cover of darkness, attempting to raid the enemy camp for personal glory. The result was predictable. His half-baked military knowledge, gleaned from incomplete lessons stolen from me, was no match for battle-hardened enemy generals. They walked straight into a carefully prepared ambush. His few loyalists were killed instantly by arrow volleys, while Harrison himself was captured alive. The next morning, enemy forces appeared before our walls. They had stripped Harrison naked from the waist up and hung him bound from a flagpole before their ranks, using him to humiliate our army. The enemy general shouted taunts from his formation. "Charlotte Blackwood on the walls, if you don't want your pretty boy lover to die horribly, open the gates immediately and surrender. Otherwise, I'll flay your former commander piece by piece and make jerky for my wine." I appeared before the battle lines, clad in the crimson armor my mother had worn in her campaigns, carrying my father's black iron warbow, mounted on a coal-black destrier. The Blackwood forces on the walls erupted in thunderous cheers upon seeing me. "Marshal mighty! Marshal mighty!" My appearance instantly elevated their morale to its peak. Harrison, hanging from the pole, saw me and cried out like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. "Charlotte, Charlotte, save me! I'm your betrothed. We have a contract." He displayed utter shamelessness, tears and mucus streaming down his face. Where was the proud young general now? I gazed at him quietly, studying this man I had once loved. My eyes held no emotion whatsoever, calm as still water. "Harrison, you are not merely worthless," I said slowly, my voice carrying clearly across the entire battlefield. "You are a complete and utter coward. Remember this: the Blackwood army never yields to threats." I slowly raised my heavy warbow, once more drawing it to full extension. This time, I aimed not at his armor, not at his hair ornament, but at his throat. Harrison's eyes finally showed despair and terror. He struggled frantically, screaming, "No, Charlotte, you cannot kill me. I loved you. I truly loved you." My lips curved in a mocking smile as my fingers relaxed. "Your love is worth less than grass." The arrow cut through the sky with thunderous force, releasing an ear-piercing whistle. One shot through the throat. The arrow pierced Harrison's windpipe with precision. He couldn't even manage a death cry before his life ebbed away with the gushing blood. His body convulsed several times on the flagpole, then went completely still, hanging there like a torn rag. Those eyes, filled with regret and unwillingness, remained fixed in my direction even in death. The enemy general was completely dumbfounded. He had never imagined I would actually strike. To kill even her own betrothed. What kind of ruthless heart did this woman possess? As they stood stunned, I raised my black iron warbow high above my head. "All forces, Hear my command." My voice echoed to the heavens. "Follow me! Charge! Kill!" I spurred my horse forward like a crimson lightning bolt, leading the assault against the enemy ranks. Behind me, the Blackwood Army's morale soared to unprecedented heights. Like tigers descending from mountains, they unleashed earth-shaking battle cries and followed in my wake. This battle raged until heaven and earth grew dark, sun and moon lost their light. We slaughtered the enemy forces until they scattered in complete rout, abandoning armor and weapons in total defeat. I personally severed the enemy general's head, using his blood to honor the spirits of my fallen Blackwood ancestors. After the battle, while clearing the field, I discovered Vivian's corpse among the dead. She had probably tried to escape in the chaos, but was trampled to death by fleeing soldiers. Her face was a mangled, bloody mess, a truly wretched end. Truly, heaven's justice turns like a wheel. On the day of our triumphant return to the capital, the entire city turned out to watch. The Emperor, grateful for my family's service, personally named me Grand Marshal and Supreme Commander of all Imperial forces. I became the first and only female marshal in the dynasty's history. At the grand celebration feast, someone tactlessly mentioned Harrison's name. I merely smiled faintly and drained my cup in one drink. That person, that entire episode, had become like dust from a previous lifetime, scattered by the first wind. After the banquet ended, I returned to the marshal's residence. Benedict had prepared hot tea and pastries, waiting for me at the entrance. He was now the chief steward of my household, enjoying his twilight years with no one daring to mistreat him. Seeing his kindly smile, peace filled my heart. Deep into the night, I donned a light robe and climbed alone to the highest point of my estate. In the distance, the capital's lights sparkled like a river of stars, 10,000 homes glowing warmly in peaceful contentment. Below the walls, patrolling Blackwood soldiers spotted my silhouette and knelt as one, calling out in unison, "Marshal Mighty! Marshal Mighty!" Their voices shook the heavens. I gazed down upon these infinite mountains and rivers, feeling the evening breeze brush coolly across my face. Once upon a time, I too had believed a woman's destiny was merely to serve her husband and raise children, to depend upon men. But now I understood the sword in my hand and the armor on my back were the most reliable support in this world. This golden age was exactly as I had wished it to be.